Imagine finally moving into your dream mountain cabin, a place of peace, freedom, and fresh air, only to have the HOA show up with the sheriff, demanding you leave immediately. They claimed I wasn't approved to live in my own home, as if my life needed their permission. What was supposed to be the happiest day of my new chapter turned into a scene straight out of a nightmare. But here's the thing. The HOA didn't expect what happened next. Was I really going to let them strip away my home, or would their abuse of power come crashing down on them instead? When I first decided to leave the noise of the city behind, I wasn't chasing luxury or status. I was chasing peace. The mountains had always called to me. Crisp air, tall pines, the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own heartbeat. After years of saving, working long hours, and dreaming about it every night, I finally purchased a rustic little cabin tucked away in a community that, on paper, promised the best of both worlds, natural beauty and a well-managed neighborhood association to keep everything orderly. At first glance, it seemed perfect. The gravel roads wound through tall evergreens. Deer occasionally wandered through. The yards and my nearest neighbors waved politely as I drove by. To me, it felt like a fresh start, a chance to finally breathe, to build something that was mine, and to escape the endless rules and politics of city living. Moving in was emotional. I can still remember unloading the first box, setting it down on the worn wooden porch and thinking, this is it. This is home. The cabin wasn't new, but it had character. A stone fireplace that looked like it belonged in an old storybook, creaky floors that told their own history, and a back deck with a view of mountains that turned gold in the sunset. It was everything I wanted. But behind that peace was something I hadn't yet seen. The HOA. They weren't just a small group of volunteers making sure the grass stayed mowed and the trash bins stayed out of sight. No, this HOA carried itself like it was running its own private kingdom. And while I didn't know it yet, moving into that cabin was about to put me directly in their crosshairs. At first, the rules didn't seem too bad. Nothing I hadn't heard of before. Keep your property tidy, don't build without approval, and contribute to road maintenance. Harmless enough, right? But the more time I spent in the community, the more I noticed the whispers. Neighbors would lower their voices when talking about the board. People kept their yards too clean, their homes too uniform, almost like they were afraid to step out of line. Still, I shrugged it off. I wasn't here to get caught up in politics. I just wanted peace, quiet, and a chance to live life on my own terms. For the first few days, that's exactly what I had. I unpacked, fixed up small repairs around the cabin, and watched the stars at night, finally free from city lights. But there were signs, small at first, that the HOA had their eyes on me. A car parked too close to my driveway, slowing just enough for the driver to glance at my porch. An envelope slipped into my mailbox with reminders about registration forms I hadn't filled out yet. Polite, but firm. And every time I felt that uneasy tug in my stomach, like they weren't just reminding me, they were testing me. What I didn't know then was that the HOA had a very particular view of who belonged in their community. To them, a homeowner wasn't truly one of them until they had passed through their invisible gate of approvals and permissions. And my cabin, my dream home, it had a history with them. A history that would soon explode into the kind of conflict no one ever expects when they're just trying to live peacefully. For now, though, I was still blissfully unaware of just how far the HOA was willing to go to enforce its control, because in their eyes I wasn't approved, and soon they were going to prove it in a way that would turn my dream move-in into a nightmare. The first real crack in my peaceful mountain dream showed itself just a week after I moved in. I had come back from a supply run in town, arms full of groceries, when I noticed a bright orange slip taped to my front door. For a split second, my heart sank. Was this a code violation? A safety issue? I peeled it off and read the words, "Unauthorized occupancy notice." At first I thought it had to be a mistake. Unauthorized occupancy? This was my cabin. I held the deed. I had signed the paperwork. I wasn't renting or squatting. I owned it. Yet here it was, a notice stamped with the HOA's seal, claiming that I had not received official board approval to move in. I brushed it off, thinking a quick call would clear things up. But that phone call only made things worse. The woman on the other end of the line, an HOA board member with a clipped tone that felt colder than the mountain air, said bluntly, "You can't occupy that property until you've been approved. Rules are rules." When I asked her what that meant, what approval I needed when I already owned the place, she only repeated herself more firmly this time. "Until we say otherwise, you are not permitted to reside there." It was the first time I felt that shift, from being a new neighbor to being a target. Over the next few days, the letters piled up. One claimed I hadn't submitted the proper move-in packet. Another warned me of fines if I continued to, violate community policy. They even listed the amounts, $50 a day for unapproved occupancy. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't even finished unpacking, and already they were threatening to bleed me dry. Neighbors started to notice too. Some avoided eye contact, probably afraid to get involved. But one elderly man, out walking his dog, stopped at the edge of my driveway. He leaned in and said quietly, "You'll want to be careful. They've run folks out before." Before I could ask what he meant, he tugged his dog's leash and shuffled off. That one line stuck with me. They've run folks out before. The more I looked around, the more I started to see it. Homes that looked strangely empty. Cabins for sale after barely a year. Smiles that never reached people's eyes. It was as if the HOA had created an invisible wall of fear, and I had just walked straight into it. The harassment escalated quickly. One morning I walked outside to find a stack of violation slips under a rock on my porch. Each one listed something more ridiculous than the last. Firewood not stacked to community standards. Unregistered outdoor equipment. Even porch light wattage inconsistent with guidelines. I felt like I was being watched. Every time I left the cabin, I caught sight of a car creeping by, someone's eyes lingering just long enough to send a message. "We see you. We're keeping track." But the worst was yet to come. One Friday evening, after a long day of unpacking and repairing, I finally sat down by the fireplace to relax. The crackling logs, the warmth, the sense of home. It almost felt normal again. Until I heard the sound of heavy boots on my porch. When I opened the door, 2 HOA board members stood there, clipboards in hand, with smug expressions, like they had already won a battle I didn't know we were fighting. One of them spoke in a voice loud enough for the whole street to hear. "You are in direct violation of our occupancy regulations. If you do not vacate immediately, further action will be taken." I remember gripping the door frame, trying to, keep my temper in check. "This is my property," I said. "I'm not leaving." They scribbled something on their forms, handed me another fine notice, and walked away without another word. But I could feel it. That wasn't the end. That was the warning shot. From that night on, the intimidation became relentless. Anonymous letters appeared in my mailbox telling me to respect the rules or face consequences. A neighbor who had once waved politely now looked at me with thinly veiled disdain. And the fines, they kept coming, stacking up faster than I could even read them. I tried fighting back the logical way. I sent certified letters demanding explanations. I attached proof of ownership. I quoted state property laws. Every time the response was the same. Vague legal jargon, more demands, and the same chilling phrase. "Until approved by the board, you are not authorized to reside there." It was maddening, like shouting into the wind, like reasoning with a wall that had no interest in listening. That's when I started to realize this wasn't about rules. This was about control. The HOA wasn't protecting the community. They were enforcing obedience. And I had become their latest example. The pressure reached its peak one bitterly cold morning. I was hauling in firewood when I noticed flashing lights reflecting off the trees. At first, I thought there'd been an accident on the road. But, as the lights grew closer, my stomach twisted. A sheriff's cruiser pulled into my driveway. The deputy stepped out, hand resting near his belt, and walked toward me. Behind him, I could see two HOA board members watching from a car at the road, their faces smug, like hunters waiting for the trap to snap shut. The deputy unfolded a paper and said, "We've received a complaint. They're claiming you're trespassing on this property." I stood there, stunned. Trespassing? On my own cabin? My hands shook as I pulled out the deed, showing him the signatures, the seals, everything. For a moment, he just studied me, the paper, and then glanced back at the waiting board members. The silence stretched, thick with tension. This was the moment everything could collapse. The moment they wanted, where I'd be dragged off my own porch while they smiled and watched. But the deputy didn't move to cuff me. Instead, he folded the paper, tucked it back into his jacket and said quietly, "I'll need to make some calls." Behind him, I saw the HOA board members stiffen. Their plan wasn't unfolding the way they had